don't try to be perfect. Try to stay connected to other people, to support to your child, and also to yourself, because diabetes is managed with insulin and technology, but families survive it through connection.
Hi, Miroslava. Welcome to the Via Diabetes interview series. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hello, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
I'd like you to give our viewers a short overview of your career and any highlights that you'd like to include.
So I often say my career was shaped less by a plan and more by people, experiences, and eventually diabetes itself. I started as a nurse, so I learned how healthcare works from the inside. But over the time, I realized that what's missing is not just treatment, it's understanding. Over the last 16 years, I work as interpreter. And 5 years, my absolute passion is diabetes education, communication, and community engagement, mostly focus on helping translate complex science and technology into something people can actually understand and use in everyday life. A large part of me is connected to international diabetes community, especially around open source technology, education, and lived experience. What matters most to me is making sure that innovation doesn't stay trapped somewhere behind closed doors, but actually reaches families who are seeking and need it. And honestly, one of the biggest highlights has simply been seeing how powerful the community can be when people stop competing and start sharing knowledge. My first experience with that shaped also how I am today, and it was Loop and Learn, my safety harbor for making our personal lives with diabetes easier. It was D-Dog and visionary Bastian Hogg that brought D-Dog voice program to life and showed me that paid forward is far beyond we are not waiting community. And not least, also Voices in Action Diabetes, the mission of James and Lucia. That's remarkable, and that's also thanks to them we are speaking today.
I know that your child was diagnosed with diabetes in 2021. I wanted to ask you what that experience was like for you personally.
We find out that Mia has got diabetes with a routine prevention checkup, so she still didn't have developed very visible symptoms. She wasn't in DKA, she was feeling quite well. That changed everything. Before that, diabetes was something I understood medically, and after that it became something we live every single day. What I didn't count with was not only the complexity, but the mental weight of it, and that constant decisions, the invisible responsibility, the feeling that your brain never fully switches off anymore. And I think many parents experience this strange contradiction. You become incredibly strong very quickly, while at the same time feeling completely overwhelmed. And that experience shaped not only how I see diabetes, but also how I communicate about it. It made me much more aware that behind every graph, every HbA1c, and every result, there is a person just trying to live a normal life.
You have a background in nursing. I wanted to ask you what your opinion is on the stigma that people living with diabetes face when it comes to healthcare professionals, and whether you've ever personally witnessed this either with your child or as a nurse with colleagues or etc.
Yes, I did, both professionally and personally. What I think that difficult part is that stigma in healthcare, for example, is often subtle. It's not usually open discrimination. It's more about accumulation of all those small moments and the way questions are asked, for example, or the assumptions that higher glucose means somebody is just not trying enough, the focus on the numbers and the results without enough curiosity of larger context. context. I truly believe that most healthcare professionals genuinely want to help, but healthcare systems are often built around outcomes and efficiency, not around understanding daily reality. Honestly, this goes, as you said, beyond healthcare professionals. Even people who care about someone living with diabetes, like teachers, relatives, friends, and colleagues, often receive very little real understanding of what living with diabetes actually means day to day. And some of them may know what diabetes is reading from the books, but what it means to constantly make decisions, carry responsibility, calculate, anticipate, and think ahead every single day, every single moment. So that gap between what people assume and what life actually looks like is where stigma begins. And the problem is that people remember how they were made to feel. And if someone repeatedly feels judged, misunderstood, or reduced to numbers, they stop being honest or even disengage completely. So I think that's why language matters so much, not because the words alone solve the things, but because language reflects attitude and attitude shapes the care.
So I know that you're both Italian and Slovakian. What are your perspectives on the systems in place to support both the physical and the mental health side of people living with diabetes in each country?
So I see the both systems, and what strikes me is that while medical care can be good, the experience of living with diabetes is still very different in both countries, and it depends a lot on where in the country you are and even who you meet. There is still a gap between what system provides and what people actually need in their daily lives. It's not often about medicine itself, but again about communication, support, and understanding. What I would love to see more is continuous support, not only in hospitals, but in schools, workplaces, and everyday life.
What is support like for your child at school, and are there any changes that you would like to see?
So my child is actually very independent today. She's 10, but frankly, in many ways, she had to become very independent very early. She started the school at 5, and from the beginning, we knew she would need to understand her diabetes herself and manage situations many children would never even have to think about. At the same time, the support at school depends very heavily on people involved and who you meet. There is often no consistent system behind them, and that creates uncertainty for both the families and the schools. Honestly, for us, without open source solutions that allow technology to be adapted to real life needs of a child but families, I think managing many barriers would certainly have been much harder. What I would like to really see is better education for school staff, clear structures, and more confidence around diabetes management, because when adults around the child are anxious or uncertain, the children absorb that very quickly.
Is there something that you'd like to see more from governments or businesses that would help with her diabetes management?
I think we need to stop treating innovation and accessibility as a separate topics. We already have incredible technologies and also knowledge, but the question is, who can realistically access them, who can understand them and sustain them for a long term. I would like to see much more investment into education, interoperability, mental health support is important, but also community-based solutions, not only products, because I think people living with diabetes need to be included very early in decision-making processes, not only consulted at the end, because products and technology can improve outcomes, but it's understanding that improves lives.
What are some of the major ways that you've impacted the diabetes community through your work in advocacy?
I think my role has mostly been connecting words that don't naturally speak at the same language or don't connect normally together. So science and life experience, technology and families, research and everyday life. A lot of my activities focus on making complex topics more accessible, whether we speak through education, translation, community projects, or communication. And I'm also deeply involved in open source diabetes community, where collaboration and shared learning are incredibly strong. So I honestly think advocacy is sometimes less about being loud and more about helping people feel less alone, but empowered and much more confident in navigating life with diabetes.
What's one piece of advice that you would give the parents of newly diagnosed children living with diabetes?
So at the beginning, it feels impossible, and then slowly, almost without noticing, you adapt, you learn, your child learns. Sorry. So at the beginning, it feels impossible, and then slowly, almost without noticing, you adapt, you learn, your child learns, and life starts growing around diabetes again. You don't just learn diabetes, you rebuild everyday life around it. So my advice would be, don't try to be perfect. Try to stay connected to other people, to support, to your child, and also to yourself, because diabetes is managed with insulin and technology, but families survive it through connection.
I love that. Thank you so much. I know that it can't have been easy to go through this, so I can't imagine what it must be like to have a kid who has type 1 diabetes. So thank you not just for everything that you do for your kid, but also for us as a community. And thank you so much for giving me your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you.
I'm very happy we did it, and the pleasure was truly mine.